We're coming to you from New York with an exclusive interview with the U.S. top envoy for Afghanistan and Pakistan, Richard Holbrooke. Hello and welcome. It's America's longest war, but the end game is still unclear for Afghanistan. So how long can it continue? When it began, the invasion of Afghanistan was a mission to pursue and defeat Al-Qaeda following the attacks of 9/11. And while attention to that goal seemed to take a backseat to Iraq during the Bush administration, President Barack Obama has recommitted to the U.S. effort in Afghanistan, tripling the number of troops at a time when intelligence sources say only 50 to 100 Al-Qaeda fighters remain. So on today's show, we ask, what does the U.S. hope to achieve in Afghanistan and how long will it stay? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. Send an SMS or an email, and we'll try to include them in the show. Well, joining me now is Richard Holbrooke, the United States Special Representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan. Ambassador Holbrooke, welcome to the program.
Pleasure.
Now, you're famous for getting together bitter enemies, knocking their heads together, and basically getting a deal signed, as you did in the former Yugoslavia. What is it with Afghanistan? Why is it so problematic, sorting that one out?
Well, first of all, the Taliban are not a government in the normal sense of the word. Al-Qaeda behind them is a nihilistic terrorist organization. So just getting them together in a room and telling them that you got to work it out with American pressure, which is what we did at Dayton to end the war in Bosnia, is much more difficult. I thought at the time Bosnia would be the most difficult thing I'd ever done, but this is tougher.
In fact, it's cost a lot of lives, of course, more than 1,200 U.S. troops. There's a whole bunch of international troops killed again today. The price has been very high for civilian deaths and casualties too. When you look back on it, Osama bin Laden is still out there. That was the reason for going in. Was it worth it?
If we hadn't gone in, we would now be facing constant terrorist attacks on the United States, Europe, and other parts of the world, all the way from here to Indonesia. So I think that the initial decision to go in was correct. What then went completely off the rails was that the United States government took its eye off the ball in 2003 to 2008 and just focused on Iraq and didn't even seem to notice that the Taliban was gaining strength and that the government was faltering. They were cutting aid down to an astonishing low number. When I visited in 2006, we were down to about $300 million in aid for Afghanistan. It was shameful. And President Obama set out to reverse that with a significant increase in civilian and military efforts, a major program to bring Pakistan and Afghanistan closer together, the first significant civilian assistance to Pakistan's democratically elected government. So there's been a huge change in policy.
But was it worth the loss in life?
That's a question that's so difficult to answer. The U.S. did what it had to do, but as a veteran of many wars, I'm very reluctant to say anything except that each individual life is sacred and each individual life is precious. And when I read about the helicopter accident today in Afghanistan with 7 NATO troops killed, it just tears at my heart.
We had an email, if I can put to you, sir, from Saudi Arabia, from Shahryar Khan, who wrote in saying, Afghans have never welcomed foreign invaders, and they will keep making problems for NATO and the US, whether it's ruled by Karzai or the Taliban. It's better for America to leave now or stay for the worst. I know it's a question that's asked a lot, but what do you see as the end game?
I don't think those are the two choices. There is a clear policy to gradually draw down and withdraw the combat forces starting next year. But the President has made clear that we will continue to give Afghanistan economic and development assistance and train its military and its police and work with Pakistan in that, especially to deal with the enemies of all our countries that lurk in the border areas.
And there's a large troop presence, of course, in Afghanistan for what many analysts believe is it's down to about 50 or 100 Al-Qaeda fighters now. Why so much firepower?
That's a very misleading statistic. I hear it all the time, but it doesn't take into account the clear point. If the Taliban win in Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda comes back. Meanwhile, we have to put them under maximum pressure wherever they are, and they're lurking along the border areas.
Is it hard to to know who to trust, considering you have people willing to negotiate and then they move on to do other things that maybe contradict what you'd like them to do. We have Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, for example, the warlord fighting the Taliban in the eastern in one eastern region, and yet again that puts him on the same side as the US, and yet he's also been a difficult candidate for the US.
Well, the history of the U.S. and Hekmatyar is very complicated and not particularly savory at times. But right now, we have nothing to do with Hekmatyar. It is certainly true that Hekmatyar sent emissaries to Kabul to talk to President Karzai as part of Karzai's reconciliation efforts to reach out to people. And in the end, you know, you don't make peace with your enemies. You have to make, excuse me, let me rephrase that. You don't make peace by talking to your friends. You have to talk to your adversaries. And Karzai has announced a reconciliation and reintegration program, or 2 programs, and we are supporting those.
Where is the situation?
But we're not engaged in talks with Hekmatyar.
Well, in terms of dealing with insurgents, Hezb-e Islami Afghanistan, HIA, has offered a 15-point plan as well. Is there any of these have any potential function for you?
Well, we look at those, and we're interested if there's an evolution. I think there has been some degree of evolution in Taliban positions in the last 6 months as we read them. But there are a lot of key issues here. The requirement to remove foreign forces are a precondition for any reconciliation is a non-starter. The role of women is a critical issue. Laying down their arms and being a peaceful part of the body politic is critical, and so on and so forth. And we must do what is necessary to defend our own national interests.
We had another email, if I could put to you from Pakistan, from Afaq Shaheen, who wrote in saying, after Vietnam, Iraq and Afghanistan, is it still possible for the US to carry out hard power as a foreign policy instrument? Long wars have left the US prone to political vulnerability. And I wonder, military resources significantly seem to outweigh the diplomatic resources for Afghanistan. Do you have what you need to get the job done?
I agree with the premise of the question, but I don't think it applies automatically to everything we do in the world. Excuse me. We're not seeking a military solution to a military political problem. General Petraeus himself has said that there's no purely military victory here, that we're looking at an issue which combines a lot of different factors.
We have to take a short break now. When we return, what role is there in Afghanistan for countries like India and China? Don't go away. Welcome back. Now it's in its longest war. What is the US plan for Afghanistan, and when will American troops see their mission end there? I'm joined by the Obama administration's envoy for Afghanistan and Pakistan, Ambassador Richard Holbrooke. Let's get back to some questions. This one came in from South Africa from a viewer. Marcus Cheche wrote in saying, the US has already started bypassing the Afghan government to deal directly with tribal authorities. Does this mean the US has lost hope in the Karzai government? And I wonder, look, I mean, the election, I know you don't really consider something too significant in the big picture that took place just now, but how much are you pegging your hopes on Hamid Karzai?
He's the elected president of the country. His success or his failure will determine the future of the country. And so it's not that we pin our hopes on him, it's that we work with him because he's been elected president and re-elected.
I want to move on to the relationship Afghanistan and Pakistan has, of course, and you've said that insurgents in Pakistan's tribal regions bordering Afghanistan are the greatest threat to world peace. Where do you put them in relation to, for example, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula or what have been the traditional enemies?
Well, Al-Qaeda, wherever it is a direct threat to the United States, but its leadership appears to be in western Pakistan. That's why I said what I said. If the attack is planned in some other country, Somalia or Yemen or somewhere else, it doesn't make it any less significant. But the last attempt to attack in the United States, which took place right outside these windows here in Times Square just a few months ago, that guy went to Pakistan for his training. Luckily, he was inept, but he would have killed a lot of people and done a lot of damage. And one has to assume that he isn't the only one.
Well, I spoke with Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi about the US role in Pakistan, linking Certainly linking Afghanistan and Pakistan, your own title is as special representative to both. This is what he had to say about that kind of linkage.
What we have qualified is that we are neighbors, and we have a common challenge, and we need a common approach to deal with that challenge. But we are two distinct countries with a different level of history and with a different level of capacity of our institutions. So you can look at us collectively, and yet it would be simplistic if you just club us together.
How do you address his concerns?
We don't clump them together, but what happens in one affects what happens in the other. And Foreign Minister Qureshi and I have become good friends and very close working partners. Last week he took me to his hometown of Multan, and we visited the shrine of his ancestors. We see things in very similar fashion, so I agree with them.
When we spoke about the drone attacks, of course, they're a very contentious issue. There was 70-odd attacks this year, 14 this month alone. It's kind of a difficult situation because it hurts the image of America and it hurts the image of Pakistan, or at least the government, because they can't seem to justify it to their own people. I was just wondering, in terms of what Minister Qureshi said, he said, well, if the US gave us the technology, we could do it without any infringement of sovereignty.
Well, this is not a subject I'm going to go into in much detail, but let me just say this. We have a common enemy in the border regions of the two countries. That enemy is seeking to overthrow the Pakistani government, to create conflict between India and Pakistan, as they did with the Mumbai attacks, to attack the United States in the homeland, as they did right outside your windows a few weeks ago, and to create as much damage as we can. And we have a common necessity to work together to diminish that threat. And we are doing that, and it has been effective. Unfortunately, details are available only through rumors and incomplete accounts. But let me just be clear. We are making progress in this area. I have no doubt about that, and I'm as cautious a person in projecting the future as anyone you'll ever interview, Riz, but this is going in the right direction.
Do you trust Pakistan?
We work closely with them as an ally. We have some differences of strategic viewpoint. Their focus since the day they became an independent country in 1947 has been on their giant neighbor to the east, India. And they have also had a sustained disagreement over almost everything with Afghanistan. But we can make movement forward. Just a few weeks ago, under American sponsorship, we brokered the most important agreement between Afghanistan and Pakistan in history. And I'll bet you've never mentioned it on your show. And that's the trade agreement, the biggest agreement they've ever done. And last week, the Afghan government ratified it, and the Pakistanis will ratify it next week, and it's going to benefit both countries. And it is not just a trade agreement, it has political and strategic significance. More of those kind of things can be done.
Another issue, I know you've been concerned about trying to build some kind of relationship with Pakistan through the floods as well. How much has the effort that the US has put in terms of flood relief helped rebuild confidence in what the US is doing there?
I consider that a really wrong-headed approach to this issue. 20 million people have been displaced. 1/5 of the country is underwater. The United States was in first with the most support, and we're going to continue to lead. We're not doing it to build support for the United States. We're doing it because people are in extreme difficulty. I toured the area. Well, that's the way it came out. I toured the area. Let me finish, because that's really what I came on the show to talk about, people in desperate need, not this usual stuff. So let me just say something on this. I toured the area last week. People are in the most desperate conditions. The United States has led the world community, but we're not doing it to build popularity. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And to your viewers all over the world, let me say, it's why we're proud to be Americans. We did it in Indonesia during the tsunami. We did it in Haiti after the earthquake. We did it in Pakistan in 2005 after the earthquake. This is bigger than all three of them combined. And the people are just beginning to return to their homes. And as they return to their homes, there are no homes left. They're gone. The cattle is gone. The crops are gone. And now the children are going to return to stagnant water, and we're going to have major cases of dysentery and cholera. And we have to do more. That's why we're here in New York this week at the United Nations, Hillary Clinton and myself leading the U.S. effort, mobilizing the international community. The whole world needs to kick in. The Turkish foreign minister told me yesterday that they had, in addition to the government support, over $120 million had been contributed in mosques all over Turkey. People have been asked to contribute, especially to their fellow Muslims in Pakistan. I think other Muslim countries are doing the same thing. The world, led by the United States, led by people of all faiths, but especially Muslims, has got to do as much as they can. Once we dig out from this nightmare, with 1/5 of the country underwater, an area as big as in Italy, once we dig out, the reconstruction will start. That will be a monumental task.
I guess the way I meant it was that in Pakistan, America's image has been hurt, and I'm wondering how much your involvement has helped to at least build the confidence in America.
You know, Riz, I don't know the answer to that. It doesn't matter to me. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do, not to buy popularity. We're Americans, and that's what we do, and I'm proud of it. And I'm proud that the United States, under President Obama and Secretary Clinton, is doing that.
In terms of, you mentioned the call on the Muslim world to do more as well, to get involved. Looking at the situation, when we look at what's happening with Muslims in America, how much of a battle are you finding it in the US to try to at least create a better sense of unity, a better sense that there's something, there's some kind of positive connection rather than this, clash of civilizations?
You know, I've never talked publicly about the dispute over the Islamic Center in Lower Manhattan, by the way, a block from where my wife has her office. But I will say this for the first time on television in the U.S. When I was in Multan last week, Foreign Minister Qureshi took me to his family shrine. He is the direct descendant of the founder, one of the main branches of Sufi Islam. And he described to us in detail what Sufism meant: tolerance, diversity, openness. And I thought to myself, because the man who's setting up the Islamic Center here in New York is also Sufi, I thought to myself, this is a living rebuke, a living repudiation to those Americans who are trying to divide us on the basis of religion. There's only one road that's only one way that road can lead, and that's to more and more bad relations. To be sure, there are people of all faiths who do things which we don't like. We've had extremists in every major religion in the world from time to time. But Islam is not America's enemy. And I was so conscious of this going with Foreign Minister Qureshi to his family shrine, which is 700 years old, which is the center, which is a pilgrimage site, quite magnificent.
How much does it complicate your job when you head out there, when you're having to deal with stories back home, such as the proposed Quran burning that was going to take place, and the kind of rhetoric that builds around that?
It never came up, except one person asked a question. That's all. We just do our job. We're there to help them with the floods, not to. And the Pakistanis have their hands full with internal issues.
What do you see as your next steps now for, you said the trade agreement's been signed between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Where else do you see some possible improvements?
Between those two countries, it is important that they reduce their differences. The war in Afghanistan will not end until the Pakistanis and the Afghan government reach some kind of common base of understanding.
There's been a lot of involvement of countries like China and India, for example, in issues such as Afghanistan and Pakistan as well, but they seem to play more of a sort of business role or economic role. How much would you like to see a greater role played by countries, certainly like China, in trying to help alleviate some of the conflicts that are existing there?
China is Pakistan's closest ally. We have a close relationship with them. They have a common border with Afghanistan. They're concerned about the fact that among the terrorists being trained are some Uyghurs who want to destabilize Western China. They have an important role to play. But India has also got an important role. And then we often neglect the country on the western border of Afghanistan, Iran. But they also have a role to play. And although we have vast differences with Iran, we cannot ignore the fact that they're a neighbor. So are Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. Afghanistan has always lived in that dangerous neighborhood, and that's why throughout history this remote, forbidding, but very compelling country has been at the center of so much international intrigue. That's why the phrase, the great game, a phrase which I am ambivalent about because it's not a game, was always used to describe Afghanistan.
Now, your responsibility is Afghanistan and Pakistan. Considering what you've said here with Iran and the surrounding countries, should you have a greater mandate? Should you be able to pull more elements together?
My mandate's fine. I've been to every single country involved in this conflict except Iran. Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, India a lot, China several times, Turkey a lot. I'm meeting all their foreign ministers here in New York. The Japanese have a concern. Our European allies have a concern. My mandate is Afghanistan, Pakistan, but that is understood to mean I go to every country that's concerned.
I was going to ask, are they pulling their weight as far as you're concerned?
We set up, in conjunction with the Germans, an international group of people with the same title as me, Special Representatives for Afghanistan and Pakistan, SRAP in bureaucratic lingo. And there are now 35 countries. Some are very small but engaged, like Denmark and Lithuania. Others are very important, like India and Japan and Australia, the Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. We meet 3 or 4 times a year. We met earlier this year in Abu Dhabi under the sponsorship of the UAE. We'll be meeting next month in Rome. So we constantly bring ourselves together. So there's a huge international effort here.
Well, Ambassador Holbrooke, thank you for your time. I know it's a busy week for you.
Thank you, Riz. It's good to see you again.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us. You can download previous shows from iTunes. This week's podcast takes a look at the dangers of explicit pornography and how it damages the way couples relate to one another. On the next show, the shadow of genocide lingers in Rwanda, with a new UN report saying the Rwandan army committed mass murder in the Congo. Rwanda's Foreign Minister, Louise Mushikiwabo, addresses the allegations. Also, we talk with hip-hop mogul and social activist Russell Simmons about the controversy surrounding the so-called Ground Zero Mosque. Be sure to tune in for that. From me and the teams in DC and New York, we'll see you next time.